My YouTube channel is growing. People are watching my videos. The reason I believe is because of my tagline, which is provoking thought to enlighten, simmer, resonate, and maybe inspire action. Simplistically, I am going to call it as it is. I am going to explore topics that are deeply emotive. And why am I doing this video? And why am I so passionate about this topic? You see, most people in our country don't know about the reality of what apartheid took out of us. It ruined us from the inside. It removed our self-confidence. It made us feel worthless. And many today are still back there, trapped in the ugly world that they were born into. All because of all places God could have placed us. He singled us out to be placed in South Africa, a country where, just because of the color of your skin, on the day you were born, the government decided how much they would spend on your education and how your life would be shaped by poverty, devoid of any hope whatsoever. Your only crime? You were born a non-white person, albeit in the most beautiful country in the world. In my case, I was told that no matter how good you are, always remember that someone else is better. So what did freedom from apartheid mean? When Nelson Mandela addressed the nation after being elected the first democratic black president in South Africa in 1994, this is what he said: "Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will experience the oppression of one by another." Beautiful words. And as you can imagine, it would have garnered much cheer and support and emotion from those who heard it for the first time. Those who represented 66% of the people, most of whom had only known oppression their entire lives. Yet in 2025, polls suggest that the support has dropped to 40% for the ANC, as people are unhappy with corruption, crime, and lack of service delivery. The above words conveyed a hope that people never dreamt possible. Mandela followed up these words with the following: "And South Africa shall never suffer the indignity of being..." This is where we need to step in, because Donald Trump, the leader of the most powerful nation in the world.
The Post reports that according to two people briefed in the meeting, the president asked, quote, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here?" referring to African countries and Haiti. The president then went on to talk about how they needed to bring in more people from places like Norway.
In the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of.
He's now determined to undo everything that Nelson Mandela lived and died for. Mandela's vision for South Africa, which is a model that the entire world celebrates, is being demolished brick by Trump. He is indeed making sure that we will again suffer the indignity of being called the skunk of the world. He's single-handedly bringing down the sun on inglorious human achievement. America has gone through 200 years of democracy, and make no mistake, they have not got it right. Trump is fast-tracking residence for white people from South Africa into America. This, whilst he is forcibly removing non-white people from the United States in the terms of ISIS-style actions, where the scenes flashing across our television screens are horrific, as people are deported into high-security prisons just because they have tattoos. The latest news is that Trump is on an Africa mission, and in mid-April, plans will be announced as to how white South Africans will be fast-tracked into the US. It is reported that US people are already in our country, under armed guard. They are in Pretoria, looking for commercial buildings to be refugee camps where white South Africans will be safe, whilst their entry into America is being formalized. Right now, the US is reportedly studying more than 8,200 requests expressing interest in resettling and have already identified 100 Afrikaners who could be approved for refugee status. Being the most powerful person on the planet, Trump does not have to speak facts. He can just spread disinformation.
No, it's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
If he wanted facts, then he has the FBI and the CIA at his disposal to send agents to South Africa to find out independently about land grabs and farm murders, which South Africa denies. However, facts do not suit his agenda of white supremacy. The formal definition of apartheid, controversially, one has to make the statement that in South Africa, you will never find one white person who says, yes, I liked apartheid. 53 million or 82% of our country is made up of black South Africans, and only 4.5 million or 7.37% are made up of whites. Apartheid to our partners was a system of institutionalized racial segregation and oppression in South Africa. It was designed to maintain white supremacy and systematically crush non-white populations. Key laws like the Group Areas Act, passed laws, and the Bantu Education Act restricted where non-white people could live, work, and study, creating a legacy of inequality that persists today. Governments spend 10 times more on a white student than a black student, 10 times more. However, the apartheid government did not stop there. They formed a number of homelands, a number of hundreds of kilometers away from urban centers, forcing men to leave their families for extended times to work in South Africa, thus tearing them away from their families. These things happened in our country because it was legislated. It was the law. They needed to separate black people from the ones that they loved. The men need to be separated. The apartheid government created 10 homelands to segregate black South Africans based on ethnic groups. So where is corporate South Africa? In fairness, action was taken to try and transform the corporate arena. However, despite the introduction of Black Economic Empowerment Legislation, BEE, corporate South Africa remains largely untransformed. The result is that today I have seen in corporate South Africa how many white people are marginalized, and skills transfer does not take place because people are afraid of losing their jobs if somebody else can do it. So this looks like a very clear-cut story, doesn't it? The white people were wrong, the non-white people were victims and were the ones who were wrong. However, this is where the story takes an interesting turn. This is where greed and human nature takes over. You see, when the ANC government came into power, they did not cover themselves in glory. They just had greed in their eyes, and many of them just focused on lining their own pockets. It was all about wealth for themselves and becoming multi-millionaires. The last thing they were thinking about were the people on the ground in shacks, or the people that had been deprived of service delivery for a number of years. As a result, the gap between rich and poor is getting wider and wider. Crime in our country has escalated, resulting in people in South Africa merely surviving on a day-to-day basis, many of whom are behind high walls and electric fences, while others are in front of them. Quality of life does not exist. The beautiful land that Nelson Mandela spoke of is indeed beautiful because it was created by God. However, oppression and depression are a feature of our landscape. Disillusionment is the order of the day. Financial problems and unhappy work environments is widespread. Our children are being brought up without hope. The The future is not bright, but bleak. These issues have contributed to the ANC's declining credibility and the challenges South Africa faces today. I will share a Gen Z story where somebody born in 2008 is still being oppressed. So in conclusion, Nelson Mandela's legacy. While his presidency focused on reconciliation, critics argue that economic transformation was insufficient, leaving many black South Africans in poverty and still living in shacks. Racism and apartheid are not relics of the past. They are alive and well, passed down from generation to generation. It's time to wake up, reflect, and take action. When the sun rose on our beautiful land this morning, the gap between rich and poor has never been wider. Wealth is not equally distributed. People are not free of oppression by others, whether it be in everyday activities or whether it be in the work environment. In fairness, history will remember Nelson Mandela for giving all South Africans a chance at life, at hope, a dawn of a new day. However, the people who came after Mandela did not care to advance his mission. The world has changed, and one thing is certain: the history books 50 years from now will talk about the economic world war because of tariffs. South Africa will have a chapter in that book. Donald Trump has made certain of that. Unfortunately, the narrative is not looking good. If we can become a real rainbow nation and show respect for each other, we can attempt to move in the right direction. It is not an option. It is a necessity, because our unborn children and grandchildren will be passing this way soon. Let us strive to leave them with a legacy of triumph. This will become a video series showing an in-depth discussion on the above topics, such as what apartheid meant to those of us who lived through it, Trump's actions being taken, which is shaking up the global landscape with respect to the imposition of tariffs, who really pays the tariffs, how this affects Americans and how it affects the rest of the world, the falling dominance of the dollar as Japan and China are selling off US Treasury bonds. A discussion on how tariffs means that theories and facts that we have all learned is now being unraveled. We need to look at things like Porter's 5 forces model, which could never have anticipated a global trade war. Tariffs becomes a sixth force. We would suggest a framework. Things like the pestle model and the SWOT model will all require revamps to become pertinent. In line with the tampering of the education system, in the video on my channel entitled The Corporate Narrative, What Nature Tells Us, we will explore a personal story, reason being that we have seen many similar parents in our situation. That video is called Fight for Your Family. Should you be interested in any of these topics, please subscribe to the channel. Now, I want to make a point that the stats that we are getting may not be correct. I mean, something tells you that something's wrong. So this independent view or review of farm murders and what's happening in our country may be something that is necessary, because the numbers do not look to be right. And especially when you have people in our country that are inciting violence against one group. The issue is that South Africa has got to take into account a number of factors that have occurred, and we do not have time to do this because we are being targeted by the most powerful person in the world.